Hello and welcome into another edition of 8Sports Nightcap here on WRAC.com and on WRAC Plus on your smart TVs. Thanks so much for stopping by for another edition of the show. And we got a really special guest this week. I'm so excited and thankful to VCU basketball. As you can tell by the title, head coach of the VCU Rams, Phil Martelli Jr. has stopped by the show, and let's go ahead and bring him in. Coach, thanks so much for stopping by here a few months into your time here in Richmond. How are things going over on Broad Street?
Nolan, it's great to be with you. As you said, it's been a few months, but most times I feel like it's been a few days. It has flown by for sure, but all good things.
Do you feel you know your way around it, at least at this point? I know those first few weeks, it was like you're probably on the phone nonstop recruiting, but I feel like now maybe you can catch your breath just a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know if we've been able to catch our breath. It just seems like, one thing after another, but I am starting to get my way around. We have not found a house to live in yet, so I feel like I've driven all over, probably within like a 30-minute radius of the BDC here. Gotten to know many of the areas, love them all, just haven't found the right house yet. Have found many of the restaurants, and fast food and
There you
whatever
go.
other nonsense I have to find to kind of survive here at night and just find something to eat. And so I've definitely, there've been a lot of roads. I'm like, man, I've been on this road a lot here the last few months. So.
Yeah, I only moved here about a year ago, so I'm now, a few months ago, I feel like I finally kind of know my way around a little bit, and it is kind of overwhelming at first. You look at all the different neighborhoods and, high school districts and areas to live in. There's so many options to try to finally, pick one. I was the same way. I was staying at an extended stay hotel for about a month trying to finally lock it down. So I can imagine it's pretty stressful on top of trying to build a team, but to, have a regular life as well, especially when you're bringing your family here.
Yeah, no doubt. And I was in the school put me up in a hotel for a while downtown here. So I was down, in the hotel. And then my time was up there. So I was trying to figure it out. Fortunately, all the young guys were able to get apartments in the same building, all the young guys on staff. And they all got one-bedroom apartments. And Luke St. Lightford, my ops guy, he came to me, he said, look, he goes, I can stay on one of those other guys, an air mattress on one of their floors. You can have my apartment. So I will compensate him for that. But luckily, it's only about maybe 7 minutes from the BDC right here. So I am envious of them. It's nice when it's just you and you can just the first week walk in somewhere, go, oh, and it is a really nice apartment.
Yeah.
And sign a lease and be moved in. Get a bed, get a couch, get a TV, and you're all set. For us, it's a little different. Trying
Yeah.
to move five of us. Our house in Rhode Island just went on the market this past weekend. I'm actually before we got on, I was checking the Ring camera to see there's some private showings today. I was
Yeah.
checking to see who's walking in there, and hopefully they look like potential buyers and not just browsers.
Exactly. A few months now, obviously your brother's on staff here, so it's probably nice to have, a familiar face around. I do kind of want to get into a little bit, that first few weeks, right? How was kind of the reception from Richmond and VCU and, just kind of this community? I've learned since I've been here just really gets around this basketball team. And did you feel that, maybe even as early as that introductory press conference?
Yeah, I felt it day one. I mean that level of passion, that level of support, and have felt it every day, everywhere I've been, is really incredible. To be at the end of March, be at your press conference, and press conferences are usually, obviously there's a celebration there to a press conference, but to then go to Buffalo Wild Wings for a radio show and have it be wall to wall people. On a night that it was opening day in Major League Baseball. It was I think the night of the Sweet 16. There's so many things going on that could be distracting people. The NBA season's winding up, the NHL season's winding down, and to have that many people there and to have them be as supportive as they are is really a special thing. That does not happen in a lot of places. even like some of the biggest of the bigs that people would think like, oh, well, there's going to be incredible support at those places. There's
Yeah.
not, but at VCU there is, and it's a special thing and something we don't take lightly. That's a major responsibility uh, because the supporters and the city, they're counting on VCU to be good, and we know that.
Yeah. And, you kind of mentioned a little bit of getting to know the area a little bit. A few months ago, I mean, I guess it's crazy. It's probably more so a couple months ago, really, when I saw you at the, I think it was a Flying Squirrels game or a VCU home game.
VCU, yeah, the
I asked
VCU
you about,
Virginia
some of
baseball
your
game.
favorite restaurants. You mentioned a little bit finding, different spots. Have you enjoyed the food scene here and the culture scene? Because there is some pretty good culture here in the city.
No, there is that. And ironically, this week's kind of the first week where I was really like, just want to make something. I just want to be home and make something.
Yeah.
But every place they've taken me, any place I've stopped in, I've been blown away. And the
Yeah.
problem for me is I'm such a creature of habit that I go to some place and I have the pork chop, and I
Yeah.
love the pork chop. And now I will go back and I'm like, I want to order something else, but I love that pork chop so much. I just want to have the pork chop. So like I've already, for a handful of these places, I've already kind of zeroed in, I guess, on like this is what my order is going to be here. I wish I could get out of my own way and be like,
Yeah.
all right, you know what? Like the pork chop, I know the pork chop's delicious. Let me try whatever the next item is on the menu. So one of these days I'll grow up and hopefully get out
Yeah,
of that.
you need to find a spot that kind of specializes in one thing. Like the Stanley has their cheesesteaks or something, and that way what you're going to get every single time, right? Because there's so many food options in the city and around the area. I've found that it's like, if you want to get to most of them, you can't go to any of them more than once because there's so many local great options. So I'll put you on the spot. Do you have a current favorite? Just a couple of months in.
There's a bunch of them. I will say I had heard a lot about Edo Squid and had not been there.
Yep.
My dad, when he came and did the VCU St. Bonnie's game on TV, he went there before the game because it was like a 9 p.m. game.
Yeah, it's
So
right around the corner.
yeah, he had dinner there, had been raving about it. Luke, who I mentioned, our ops guy, his parents were in town. They went there, and he was like, "Oh my God!" And me and Jimmy went there on a Saturday night, and it was mobbed. But we got in there, and I had spaghetti with crab meat. It was a special. Here's the problem with what I just said. It was a special, so I don't know if it's something they
Yeah,
have a
maybe you
lot.
won't be able to get that when you come back.
It was. I'm still thinking about it. My mouth is still watering over. But there's been a ton of places. I'd be crazy to just
Yeah.
say that is the only spot. Again, every place I've been to really good, and there's a whole ton others that I have not been to that somebody inevitably will say, oh, you know what, you got to try, and I'm like, oh, okay, I keep hearing that. So I don't know if I'll have time to get to them soon, but
Yeah.
I will definitely try.
We've been trying to make a list and bucket list type thing, but even that is overwhelming when you look at all the different options. But anyway, I would like to kind of dive into your background a little bit to kind of give our viewers maybe a better idea, of where you come from. Obviously, your dad was a coach at St. Joseph's for decades and saw all sorts of success there. You played for him there and were a co-team captain, and then you spent 20 some years as an assistant from Central Connecticut, Manhattan, Niagara, Delaware, a G League team in Delaware, and then Bryant, of course. But to go back to, growing up underneath a college basketball coach, I'm sure was very different, for most people. Obviously, maybe some people have their dad as their high school head coach or, little league for that matter. But to grow up in a basketball family-centric household, I'm sure you grew up, rooting on St. Joseph's. What was that like to be in that environment where, obviously to be a Division I basketball coach takes a lot of time, away from family?
Yeah, I mean it was a special thing. I mean, obviously, it's hard. Like he's gone a lot. As an assistant growing up, he did not make very much money. When we were growing up, we lived in a twin house, a side by side. I don't know what they call them down here, but we call them a twin house. In our neighborhood in Drexel Hill, one car. That car, you got in that car and there's a chance it could run out of gas, and not have any money to put in the gas tank. So, to watch that, but to grow up around it, the camaraderie of being part of a team. I always say this, I love being a teammate, whether it was as a player, as an assistant coach, now as a head coach, just love being part of a team. But yeah, we've grown up. It's just always been part of us. My mom played. She won 3 national championships at Immaculata
Oh, did
College.
you? Okay.
Yep,
Shout out, mom.
in the 70s. So they met at basketball camp. I met my wife working basketball camp. My wife played. She lost in the Division III national championship game her senior year when she was at Eastern Connecticut. Her father's a high school coach. Her brother's on my staff, Brendan Phelps. My brother's on my staff, and Jimmy. It's just what we've known. We just have grown up in those gyms and around the players and being allowed to, have the opportunity to go all kinds of different places. I mean, me, Jimmy, and my dad did a clinic in Finland,
That's pretty cool.
probably 12, 13, maybe 14 years ago. Going to Italy as a senior in high school with my dad. He takes his team on a foreign trip. Going to recruiting a player in Costa Rica. Obviously, all the different states. I always say I think I've been to like 41 or 42 states.
Yeah, you got to
And
knock
I'm
them
not
all
sure
out.
that there's any state I've been to that didn't involve basketball at
Yeah.
least once, right? Like, yeah, I've been to Florida to go to Disney, but like I've also been to Florida for games and recruiting and all kinds of stuff. So, just having those opportunities and to get to meet people. I mean, we had, my dad befriended a pro coach from Poland, Richard from Poland. He would come over once a year and stay at the house for a week or two. And like, no one else that we knew was doing that. They didn't have that experience or, get to know Dimitri Damani, who played for my dad and, was one of the first Russian players to come over after USSR, collapsed and once the Soviet Union collapsed and kind of opened that up, like he's one of the first guys to come over and play college basketball and to know him and still know him to this day. It's just really cool stuff, to be able to link that back, all because of the game of basketball.
Yeah, and to be a part of that and then get the opportunity to play for your dad at St. Joseph's and, to kind of turn the curtain back a little bit. If you pull up his player reference, don't do it. You didn't get to, you got to play,
Not a whole,
30
I always
some
say
games.
this, when we use the term play, we use it loosely. I
Yeah.
was on the team. I was on really good teams. I told the players this the other day. I used to joke with Larry Dock, the SID. Larry Doherty just finished as the SID at Temple actually and retired recently. And I used to tell him like, if I get to 10 career points, I want a ball because that's the equivalent of these other
Yeah,
guys scoring 1,000.
exactly.
I
Did
got
you
the
get to
eight.
10?
So, no, I got the 8. I
Ah,
told the players, I said, when you can remember all your baskets, when you remember the layup at Keeney Gym against Rhode Island, you remember a pull-up jumper against Duquesne, 2 free throws against Duquesne, and a little runner against Drexel. It's bad. I hope none of them can remember all of their baskets. So I do say though, I should be in the NCAA record books because I was 2 for 2 from the foul line. So 100%
yeah.
is an all-time
One of a
NCAA.
few. I'm sure
Yeah.
your winning percentage of when you played was pretty good as well, right?
Yeah. No, we won a lot of games and again, I said this to the players in our introductory meeting last week when they all got here that, from my sophomore, junior, and senior year, in the regular season, we were never not in first place. At that time in the Atlantic
Wow.
10, it was 2 divisions, so we were the Eastern Division, but we were first place from that first A10 game my sophomore year. We won and went on, we were whatever. So we were in first place every day for those 3 years. We were in first place, but lost in the semis each year. We did not get a chance to cut down the net. And it's what I want for all my players is to have that opportunity to climb that ladder in a jersey and cut down the net. I've been fortunate to do it as a coach in a suit and in a quarter zip, which was cool. But there's something about being in a jersey, climbing that ladder, and being able to cut down that net. And it's something that drives me every day for them, to have that opportunity because, and we were good teams. We went to the NCAA tournament in
Yep.
2 of those 3 years, went in the NIT another year. And I just remember my senior year, we lost to Dayton at Dayton in the semis. and waking up Selection Sunday, knowing that we were going to be like a 6, 7 seed. We ended up being a 7 seed, I think. But still being despondent, like being miserable that we hadn't won the championship the day before. And I love Selection Sunday. It's probably the one
Yeah.
time in my life where I've woken up on Selection Sunday and not been like just ecstatic. And I was the complete opposite. I was just miserable, and I just remember moping around and being upset up until our name was called. Once our name was called, it kind of helped ease that pain, but that pain is still there. And I don't want any of our guys to have to go through that. I want them to have that opportunity, each and every time.
And how special was it to, spend that time with your father as your, head coach of your, Division I college basketball team, and to go through that? I'm sure it was, much different from maybe when you were in high school compared to now you spend it every day with them, every second, every practice workout nonstop with them, right?
Yeah, it was really cool. And my grandfather was around too. My
Oh, really?
dad's dad, when my dad got the head coaching job when I was a freshman in high school, my grandfather retired. And the two things he did every single day was he'd go down to South Philly and take care of my great grandfather, Video Pop, we called him. So my grandfather Pop would go down and see Video Pop, make sure he was, had lunch and taken care of, and then he'd come to practice. So in those gyms for 4 years, it'd be me on the court, my dad on the sideline, and Pop up and he'd come in, sit in the top row, he'd watch
Yeah.
practice and leave. And then every trip he was with us. And to have that, the one problem was at the airport, we'd fly commercial, and there were 3 Phil Martellis on the manifest, and inevitably we'd get to the airport, and this was when like anybody could walk through the airport. There was
Yeah.
no security. It was no, it was pre 9/11 and all that stuff. So, but we'd get up to the gate and they'd say, well, we only have a ticket for one Phil Martelli, because they would look at it and think it was a mistake, and they'd cancel. So my grandfather was Philip Bedger. My dad, I forget how they figured it out and tried to like put one in as this, one in as that. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. I mean, I wouldn't trade those 4 years for anything. To be around my dad every day, somebody that I idolized and still do. To have that opportunity to be there every single day, and then obviously to have my grandfather around, and then you went into home games there, and it was like a family reunion. It was 2 or 3 sections of just friends and family there every single night. Those are some of my fondest memories for sure.
That's an awesome story. You mentioned your name a little bit. I wanted to bring this up earlier, but on Twitter, you go by, it's Philip. People are calling you Phil. Some people drop the juniors. What do you prefer? I'd like to get out in front of that, make sure that I'm saying
I
it right.
go by Phil. There are some people that will call me Philip, I guess, occasionally.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, I don't even know what it says on my Twitter. I'm so oblivious to some of that stuff sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Should probably be more aware, but I'm not. Yeah, Phil, usually Phil Martelli Jr.
All right, yeah. I want to make sure we're getting it right for the 6 and 11 o'clock
When
news.
it's just coach though, sometimes they'll put like Coach Martelli Jr. and I'm like, I don't need that. Like that can just be Coach Martelli.
Coach Martelli, okay.
But yeah, Phil. I go by Phil. If you're not one of my players, I prefer that you call me Phil. There's a lot of people that will still call you coach, and I'm like, I'm not your coach. I'm Phil. And that's kind of who I am.
Fair enough.
I am their coach. Those guys down in that gym, but with everybody else, I'm just Phil.
Well, to pull back a little bit, when I'm doing interviews with coaches and stuff, I'd like for them to maybe see me as an athlete. So I'll drop a coach in there to kind of maybe
like
get a little bit of
that's a good
respect
one.
from them. But
That's a fair one. I like
yeah.
that.
So after your playing days with your dad, though, you kind of went on this journeyman type situation. I saw online you were the youngest Division I head coach or assistant coach at Central Connecticut right after college, and then you kind of jumped all around, kind of like you mentioned, like what your dad did. You went to Manhattan, Niagara, Delaware, until you finally landed at Bryant for 20 years. I mean that was a grind that you put in the time for, and then now you find yourself as the head coach of Bryant and then VCU. What was that? I know it's hard to put 20 years into an answer, but to go through that grind, which I'm sure it was, some of those days at Manhattan and Niagara and the Blue Hens.
Yeah, I mean, it was. There were days it was hard, especially early on. I was fortunate this way. I was fortunate that everybody I was around was a person that had success.
Mm-hmm.
They were all very different. And it was hard because I knew one way, I knew my dad's way, and I thought it was the greatest way ever. And then I went to Central Connecticut, and Howie Dickerman, who was wildly successful there and beloved, at that school and throughout the state of Connecticut, is one of Jim Calhoun's main assistants that helped bring UConn to national prominence. He was very different, and it was hard. That was a hard adjustment. It was hard adjusting to now you're a coach, and that's a different, whole different world than being a player. And he just had a different style to him, the way he kind of went about things. So, that was hard. Then I went with Bobby Gonzalez, and he was just a million miles a minute, every day. And again, very different than those other guys, but wildly successful. And then Joe Mihalik, very different than those guys, but very successful. And then Monte Ross, very different than all those other guys, very successful. So I was able to kind of get little pieces from each of them. Certainly keep my own self, but as I say, like every single day, like there's something, and I'll be like, if you stopped me in that moment and said, "Where'd you get that from?" And I'd say, "Oh, that was from Howie Dickerman. That was from Bobby Gonzalez. That's from my time at Niagara. That's from Joe Mihalik. That's from my time at Delaware." Whatever it is, like there's little pieces of that everywhere. But it was, it was a grind through. Like it was not a meteoric rise. Like I wasn't one of these like superstar young assistants that all of a sudden is a high major assistant at 28 years old.
Yep.
And, there were a lot of twists and turns. There was a bunch of jobs in there that, I thought I was getting and didn't get, or thought I had a chance and I didn't. And jobs I wanted that I didn't get, jobs I got that I wasn't sure, like, is this the right move? But somehow, some way it all works out, And I go way, way back after my first year at Central Connecticut, to become the youngest assistant, I was in a what would I guess today be considered like a basketball operations, kind of a hybrid assistant coach basketball operations role. And I was offered a grad assistant job at Clemson. And I go down there, and ironically, the manager that picked me up and dropped me off at the airport on that trip was Will Wade.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And Oliver Purnell was the coach. He had offered me a grad assistant spot. I accepted while I was down there, and then flew back, and kind of the next morning woke up, that's what they always say, sleep on it, right? And I slept on it and woke up, and I was like, I don't know, this doesn't, I got a chance. There's a chance I can be moved up at Central. I can be an assistant coach. I'll be on the road recruiting. I'll be on the floor at 21 or 22 years old, 20, I guess 22. And I called him and had to turn it down, and was like, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing or not.
Yeah.
Turned it down, and 3 weeks later we had camp, and my wife, Megan, she wasn't my wife obviously at the time, she came walking in. I did not know her. So if I take that Clemson job, then I'm at Clemson. I don't meet her, who knows? I'd probably meet some Southern belle or something like that. But, like it's all worked out, and 17 years later, we've been married and 3 kids, and, it's been awesome. So it's just crazy, the twists and turns that this takes, that you never know where it's going to lead, Mike Rhodes getting this job, and really I'll go back to Ed. Ed was our AD at Niagara. So Ed getting the VCU job, and, obviously, the shuffles that have happened there, and Mike getting here, and, Ed and I staying in close touch, and then Jimmy being here, and, I think it all just somehow leads you where you're supposed to be. And, like I said, it wasn't a meteoric rise, but I feel like every single place I was supposed to be at that time. If I knew it or not, or understood it or not, I was where I was supposed to be. And it has made me so much better. And, I go back and think about those times where those tough phone calls home going, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. I don't, I thought I always wanted to coach, but you know what, this is really hard, or this guy's really hard to work for, or this is, messed up, or this is, and I think every single one of those things helped mold me, and, help me be ready to be a head coach, and then be ready to take on, the task that is at hand now.
Yeah, and you mentioned that, it was a little bit of a grind, 20 some years, and then all of a sudden you kind of get an opportunity to, you were acting head coach at the start of the 23-24 season, then you take over for the entire, you have a full off season as a head coach, and then now all of a sudden you're getting a call from Ed to come over to coach an A-10 Power in VCU, and really if you look at it, this is just your second off season as a full-time head coach, going into the year knowing that you're going to be the head coach, right? So it's like all of a sudden you went from years and years of putting in the work to, now do you feel like you've made it per se, or like you've taken that, next step to take an opportunity like the one here in Richmond?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly as a head coach, I guess it's been meteoric, in that regard.
I didn't mean,
Uh,
hopefully that wasn't insulting.
no, I say it all the time.
Yeah.
So it definitely has felt that way. Um, but again, I'll credit all those guys that I worked for and worked with, over the years and helping me be prepared. And, I had my eyes on being a head coach, the last, maybe 10 years or so.
Hmm.
And not necessarily like, oh, I got to be a head coach and I got to be a head coach, but just like trying to be ready and have a plan for when you do become a head coach. And, people say that to you all the time, right? Like, well, you got to be ready. You got to be, make sure you're ready, make sure you're thinking like a head coach and all those things. And I really took that to heart, those, however many years, and was fortunate that worked for guys throughout my career that gave me autonomy, and really gave
Yeah.
everybody on the staff autonomy and said like, look, what can you do? And, I've always felt like, you handle responsibility. That's how you get more responsibility. And for me, that was always my goal, was like to have, again, it didn't always come with pay raises. I wish it did. Otherwise, we would have been living a lot more comfortably. But, knowing that I'm doing a good job because now I'm in charge of scheduling, and now I'm doing a good job with that. Now I'm in charge of the budget. Now I'm in charge of this. Now I'm in charge of that. Now, I'm the one that's kind of seeing the future of, all right, in a month, it's going to be housing selection. So let me reach out to residents. Like, I don't need somebody to tell me to do that. I'm
Yeah.
already on top of that. And, so that stuff got me prepared to be a head coach, and all those things, the big picture stuff, the on campus, off campus stuff, the X's and O's, certainly, having that opportunity to do so many different things, was huge. And then, it's certainly the job at VCU is more eyeballs, more exposure, more of a microscope, fishbowl, whatever word you want to use,
Hmm.
than it is at Bryant. But we have a formula. We have a formula for how we want to
Yeah.
play, how we want to recruit. And at the end of the day, really, this is about people. And it's trying to make true connections with people. And we had a staff meeting this morning before our team workout, and that was a big part of it. It's like, look, these guys, especially these transfers in this day and age, they're all coming from places where, they maybe didn't have great experiences. Not that they were treated poorly, they just didn't play as much as they thought,
Yeah.
or, a coaching change or whatever. And it's like, this is still about people. We got to make sure that they are as comfortable as they can be in their own skin, and then give them our best, and then in turn we'll get their best. And that's when you see the results, on the court. And I'm a firm believer in that. And whether we're coaching at Bryant, we're coaching at VCU, we're coaching at St. Bernadette's Elementary School in Drexel Hill, Pennsylvania, where I went, wherever it is, like we're going to do it that way. And it won't change with the number of eyeballs or the number of the seats in the arena, or any of that.
And from what the vibe is around the city and talking with people, it seems like everyone's really excited. I know you got to go here soon, so we'll kind of end on this. The excitement level seems to be through the roof. What you've done with being able to, keep some of the talent that was here from last year's roster and bring in some of your talent from Brian, as well as pick up a bunch of people. How excited are you to just get these guys in the gym and take on this next season, which is, less than half of a year away already at this point?
Yeah, we've been able to do 3 workouts so far. They came back last week, and then we got started really this week. So we've done 3 team workouts. I'm really pleased. The energy, the competitiveness of the group, uh, it fits us. Fits us and what we're about. And so it's been fun to work with them. It's fun to get to know them. Understand who they are as people. Again, at the start of it, that's got to be the most important thing. I know who they are as players. I can watch their film. I can see their stats. I can do all that. But who are they as people? Really getting to know them. And I do. I really enjoy my conversations with them, and kind of not breaking down walls, but just kind of like finding those commonalities and get to know each other. We did a little exercise last week, and a couple guys every day, including staff, everybody that's involved in the program, had to get up in front, and we did 21 questions, and I had 60 questions, and I had 60 questions. I just asked them 21 random questions from that list.
Yeah.
It could have been like, who's your favorite superhero, to your favorite, best basketball win you've been a part of, to, best Halloween costume you've ever had.
Okay.
Would you travel to outer space? It was all kinds of different stuff. It's just, getting to know them and kind of see them, interact and react and talk to each other, and has been cool. And then, this week getting on the court with them and watching the way that they work, how quickly they've been able to pick up, we're not doing a ton right now. It's a lot of skill stuff, but being able to pick up drills and kind of pick up little nuances that we're trying to teach them, gives me, a level of optimism that, this group has has a chance, and we'll see what it looks like as it goes. The connection of the group is the most important thing. The X's and O's and all that kind of stuff is secondary to that, making sure that this group is connected. But, we finished a little bit ago, and I looked down, almost half hour later, and I think it was I don't think it was everybody, but it was most of them were like still huddled around at half court, like just talking. I don't know what they were talking about. They could have been saying like, Martelli's crazy. I hate his bald head. His beard looks silly. Like whatever they were saying, I don't know, but they were there together, just talking, and looked like they were enjoying themselves. Those are the moments that I look for right now, that, if you can find those benchmarks along the way, then, there's a chance to do something, and reach the things that we want to reach.
Awesome. I can't wait for next season. But Coach, thanks so much for taking the time to sit down and talk a little about your background. I went down a memory lane there a little bit. I'm sure hopefully that wasn't too embarrassing for you, but I really appreciate you taking the time.
You. Thanks for your support and your coverage and the interest in our program. I do really appreciate that.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Coach. Have a good one.
Thanks,
sorry, Phil, not Coach. Phil. All right. Have a good one.
Thank you.
All right, well, that was head coach of the VCU Rams, Phil Martelli Jr., of course, was announced, this past March. A lot of excitement around this next year's team. Big shout out for him for taking the time to chat today. I feel like we really got a good idea of his background, where he comes from and what his, coaching career has been like. He mentioned it, 20 years as an assistant to, lead up to this moment. And he seems excited to get to work and seems to be enjoying Richmond so far. Hopefully he get settled here soon. If you if you can help him find a spot, maybe reach out to him. But I know he's got a kids basketball camp coming up later this June. I'm pretty sure tickets are still on sale for that. I did a story on it a couple of weeks ago mentioning that they were starting that this year. It's for school-age kids from I think it's like second grade and up. For both the boys and girls sides. Be sure to check out the VCU website if you want to maybe send your kid off to one of his basketball camps that he's planning on hosting this summer. Well, that's going to wrap up another edition of 8Sports Nightcap here on WRAC Now and on WRAC Plus. Thanks so much for stopping by. If this is your first time tuning into an episode because you saw that it was Coach Martelli, feel free to stick around next week. And the week after that, we have the show weekly. I try to sit down with one of the teams or coaches or personalities from around the area to kind of discuss, what's going on in the world of sports. And then once football season ramps back up, we'll kind of do some recap stuff as well. But it's been a lot of fun hosting this show here. If you're first time listening, be sure to check out some of the older episodes. I got some really good ones with some of the personalities and, coaches from around the area. But that's going to wrap things up for another edition. We'll see you next week. Bye, guys.